the Lamb who was slain, who is sitting at the right hand of the throne of God in his throne room in heaven. He is worthy to break the seals and open the scrolls and unleash the wrath of God on a God-rejecting and God-hating world during the 7-year tribulations, Daniel's 70th week. And John, he is going to watch it all happen. Take a look at this. Revelation chapter 6. Now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures. We know where they are. They're in the throne room of God. And they said, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. And then the Lamb of God, there in the throne room, opened the next seal of this scroll, and the second living creature said, "Come." And this time it was a red horse, and then a black horse, and then a pale horse. And it seems to us, when we study this closely, that these seal judgments are going to take place during the first half of Daniel's 70th week, the first 3.5 years. Take a look at this chart again that we've been working our way through, and we're going to continue to do this. So here's Daniel's 70th week, and it looks like there they are. The seal judgments 1 through 7 are in the first 3.5 years of Daniel's 70th week. Now we think this, obviously, they're the first thing that takes place on earth in the book of Revelation after chapter 4, the things that take place after this. So of course it's going to be in the first half, but then also we notice parallels between the seal judgments and Jesus's eschatological discourse, the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24. Let's take a look at some of those parallels. So here we have the seal judgments, and they're reflected in the first handful of verses of Matthew 24. Let's go to that chapter. Now, you remember where we are contextually in the book of Matthew. Jesus just had a knockdown, drag-out fight with the Pharisees and the scribes and the Sadducees there in the Jerusalem temple. He unleashed 7 woes and bested them in all of this debate there in the temple. And then he leaves the temple with his disciples, and he says to his disciples, of the temple, that there will not be one stone left upon another. And the disciples are like, "Oh my gosh, the temple's beautiful. What are you talking about? When will these things be?" And look at this. These are the eschatological elements of this discourse. What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? And Jesus just lays it all out. In verses 4 to 14, he describes events that will take place during the first half of the tribulation. The first 3.5 years, a period that we call the birth pains. And then he moves on to the midpoint of the tribulation in 15 to 20, when the abomination of desolation will be set up in the temple there. That's 15 through 20. And then immediately after that, that will unleash what we call the Great Tribulation, the second half of Daniel's 70th week. After which, that is immediately after the tribulation, Matthew 24:19, we have the second coming of Jesus in 29 to 31. But look specifically at the parallels between the seal judgments and the judgments that Jesus describes in the Olivet Discourse, okay? Notice this. Let's make this case why we think that the seal judgments are in the first half. So let's start with the second seal here in 6 verse 4. The red horse was permitted to take peace from the earth. And what does Jesus say in Matthew 24:6? There will be wars and rumors of wars. And then we have language that seems to describe poverty, famine, inflation, economic inflation. And this seems to be related very possibly to a famine, which is what is described in verse 7 of Matthew 24. And then the fourth seal has both famine and pestilence, which are linked together in Luke's account of the Olivet Discourse in Luke chapter 21. The fifth seal, it describes the longing and the lament of the martyrs in heaven. When will you avenge our blood on the earth? And then the very next couple of verses in Matthew 24 talk about the saints being delivered up to tribulation, being put to death. And then the sixth seal describes an earthquake and then cosmic events, which we also see in the Olivet Discourse as well. And they're linked together in Luke's version here in Luke 21. So it seems pretty clear to us that these seal judgments are going to take place in the first half of Daniel's 70th week. But what about that curious rider on the white horse? Now, some people, they look at the white horse, they're like, well, Jesus is riding on a white horse in Revelation 19. Maybe this is talking about Jesus. But does that make sense? I mean, why would Jesus, the Lamb in the throne room, break the seal, which releases Jesus on a white horse? That's kind of an odd series of events. And then why would Jesus be at the head of an army of war, poverty, and death? That also doesn't seem quite to fit. No, it makes sense to me that this rider on the white horse is not the Christ, but the Antichrist. And you remember, of course, how the tribulation begins, right? It begins with the Antichrist making that covenant with Israel. And so the first seal really should be here in this purple box, shouldn't it? And then if we jump over to the comparison with the Olivet Discourse as well, notice how Jesus' very first prediction of this period of birth pains, he says, many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ. And we believe that the first rider on the white horse, the Antichrist, is going to make that claim about himself. So if the first seal is the Antichrist, the last seal is nothing. It is silence. You remember that? When the seventh seal was broken there in the throne room, there was silence for half of an hour, for 30 minutes. Isn't that a curiosity? And following that, 7 angels are handed 7 trumpets, and we start the cycle over again with 7 more judgments. So these chapters of Revelation describe 3 cycles of 7 judgments: seals, trumpets, and bowls. Now, you can see it's very plain that they all have the same pattern, don't they? They begin with a heavenly prelude. There's a lengthy prelude to begin the 7 seals, chapters 4 and 5, but there's equally significant preludes to start off the trumpets and bowls as well. And then after the prelude, up in heaven in the throne room, 6 seals are open, or six judgments, and these can even be divided between 4 and 2, where the first 4 are together as a set. Each of these 4 were unleashed with a different rider on a horse, but that isn't the case with 5 and 6. And the same is true with the trumpets and the bowls. Judgments 5 and 6 seem to be set apart from 1 to 4. And then after an interlude, which we will discuss in our next lecture, there is the 7th seal, trumpet, and bowl standing at the end. Well, this similarity in structure between the seals, trumpets, and bowls, and a number of other similarities between these judgments as well, have led certain scholars to suggest that these are not 3 linear cycles of judgment, where it's seals, and then trumpets, and then bowls, moving chronologically through time, but rather some have suggested that these are 3 judgments that all reflect the same period of time. They're repeated 3 times. So instead of seals, trumpets, bowls, it's seals, trumpets, bowls, all 3 end with the second coming, and then the end of God's wrath and the coming of the kingdom. That is the claim which we call a recapitulation. So let's evaluate this theory. Do we think that Revelation recapitulates the same series of judgments 3 times, and then perhaps even a 4th here in 12 to 14, and people see other cycles maybe in 17 to 19, and then in chapter 20 as well, this repetition of the same sequence of events? Let's evaluate that theory. Well, first off, one argument in favor of recapitulation is the very close similarities between specifically the trumpets and the bowls. Notice how the first 4 trumpet judgments are poured out or target the earth, sea, rivers, and sun. Earth, sea, rivers, and sun. Same with the bowls. But let's take a look at these comparisons in even greater detail. because the comparisons are very present. So you notice here in trumpets and bowls 1, 2, 3, and 4, they target the same location within the earth. But let's look at these a little bit more closely. You'll notice that in many of these, there is something from heaven that is inflicted or targeted or thrown or poured out on the earth. Of course, the bowls are poured out on the earth, poured out into the sea, poured out into the rivers, poured out into the sun. But then after the trumpet is blown in heaven, something, a hail, fire mixed with blood, are thrown down upon the earth. A great mountain burning with fire is thrown down into the sea. A star fell from heaven. Another star fell from heaven in the fifth trumpet. So that's a similarity. And then also notice in these set of judgments, trumpets and bowls, that the sea becomes blood in the second trumpet, just like the sea becomes blood in the second bowl judgment. And then as well, look how the sky is darkened in trumpet number 4 and bowl number 5 and trumpet number 5. And then an army is summoned from beyond the Euphrates in trumpet 6 and in bowl number 6, comes from the kings from the east. A whole giant number of mounted troops are summoned in Revelation 9 after trumpet number 6. And then also, if we were to jump here for yet another argument in favor of recapitulation, are these happily ever after statements which occur before the end of the book. So look at here in or in chapter 11, there's a statement that says, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord, and the dead are going to be judged, and the saints are going to be rewarded." And a similar thing is in chapter 14 as well. Now you'll notice that both of these happily ever after statements, as I'm calling them, are going to occur before the end of the book. Here in chapter 11 and then here in chapter 14 as well, we have a couple of harvests where the Son of Man reaps the saints, but then he also reaps the enemies of God who are put into the winepress of the wrath of God, which we read about in chapter 19. So that's kind of strange that these "it is over" statements would occur before the end. It seems like a recapitulation is happening potentially. And then after the seventh bowl, it explicitly says, "It is done. The wrath of God is finished," here in chapter 16. And then notice as well, at the seventh seal, seventh trumpet, and seventh bowl, there is a storm theophany which takes place. And it's kind of debated, should this section, this little storm and lightning and thunder, should this really be plopped over here? But it's certainly true that after the seventh trumpet, we have this storm, and after the seventh bowl, we have the storm. Let's look at those storm theophanies side by side, seal trumpets and bowl, with very similar language. Peals of thunder, flashes of lightning, a great earthquake, even hailstones in two of these occasions. And look what Beale says, G.K. Beale, in response to this. He says that each text thus narrates the same last judgment, so that the latter two, trumpets and bowls, simply recapitulate the first, that is the seal. And then notice as well this description of Babylon. Here in chapter 14, we get this phrase, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great," which we're going to get exactly repeated word for word in chapter 18. And the curiosity is, Babylon is really introduced and destroyed in chapters 17 and 18. So why do we have way back here in chapter 14 a description of the fall of Babylon? Isn't that an oddity? Well, given all of that evidence, what do you think? Are you on board with recapitulation? Do you think that the same set of events is repeated, perhaps with different words and different emphasis, multiple times in the book of Revelation? Well, I don't think so. I'm not on team recapitulation. No, I think that the seals, trumpets, and bowls are chronological and linear. And here's why. Well, first argument, it is the most natural reading of the text, because even among recapitulationists, Beale and others, no one really agrees with how many cycles there are or when we should divide them. So with a simple linear chronological reading of the text, it doesn't leave you guessing as to what happens or where we are in the text. And recapitulationists, they want to stress the similarity between these judgments, but there are many differences between the judgments as well, which shouldn't be kind of whitewashed in their details. Let's take a look at some of the differences between these judgments. Even specifically between the trumpets and bowls, the seals are nothing like the trumpets and bowls, by the way. It's only the trumpets and bowls that are quite similar, but even among the similarities between these, there are key differences. With trumpet 1, fire is poured out on earth, but with bowl 1, it's fire, or it's boils upon the skin. In trumpet 4, a third of the light of the sky is darkened, but the very opposite happens with bowl number 4. Rather than the sun being darkening, its heat and its light is intensified, and it scorches with fire. And then trumpet 5 and bowl 5 are very different from one another. And then, if these judgments are linear and it goes from one to the next, one might expect them to become more severe, more intense as you go on from the seals into the bowls. And that's exactly what we get. There's an intensification of these judgments between seals, trumpets, and bowls, where with the seals, there is a specific fraction that's indicated where a fourth of the earth is killed. But then with the trumpets, a larger fraction is targeted. It's not a fourth now, it's a third. And then once we get to the bowls, we're not talking about fractions at all. We're talking about the entire populace of those who are marked with the beast become the targets of some of these bowls. So there's an intensification in that right, but then also there's an intensification of the resistance to God and the response, the stubborn response of man to all of these judgments as well. Take a look at this, where after the seals, the people on earth simply try to hide from God, hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne. But then after the trumpets, there's just outright unrepentance. They did not repent of the work of their hands. But after the bowls, why, they just blaspheme God to his face. They curse him for the judgments, the just judgments that are falling upon the earth during this time. Well, if we were to continue in our arguments or that is arguments against recapitulation, what other explanation may describe their relationship between seals, trumpets, and bowls? It has been called a telescopic progression, where the trumpets are contained within the seals. Now, you remember, after the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for half of an hour. So there's no judgment after seal number 7, but rather 7 trumpets are handed out to those 7 angels there in the throne room. So it seems like the 7th seal contains the 7 trumpets. And then after the 7 trumpets, or after the 7th trumpet, there is no judgment either. There's this worship in heaven, and what follows after that, it seems, is the 7th bowls contained within the 7th trumpet. And then, additionally, and I think kind of what's most important for me, the most important argument against recapitulation is a series of chronological relationships that are established here within these chapters. Let me show you the first of these chronological statements established within the chapters. Here in chapter 8, after the 4th trumpet, a great eagle, he's going to say, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth at the blast of the trumpets that are about to blow," telling us there's going to be 3 woes that are going to take place. And then the very next trumpet, trumpet 5, the first woe has passed, but 2 more are to come. After the 6th trumpet, there's no woe. But what follows is the interlude in chapters 10 and 11. And after chapter 11, we have the 2nd woe takes place. And then at the end of chapter 11, we have the 7th trumpet. But again, there's no woe. So what does this mean? If we have woe number 1 here, and then we have woe number 2 here. Where's woe number 3? It's never explicitly stated. Therefore, it has to be after another set of judgments. Therefore, it has to be contained somewhere in these bowls. So therefore, the bowls must come after the trumpets, because 2 of the woes are here. Woe number 3 has to be here. Now let's look at another text here, another chronological relationship that's established here in the text. At the very beginning of the bowl judgments, it's the 7 angels who had the 7 plagues. It says that these plagues are the last, for with them the wrath of God is finished. And after the last bowl, they say it is done. Now, if these bowls are the last, well, then what must have been the first? It must have been the trumpets and the seals. If the wrath of God is finished with the bowls, then he must have started with the seals and the trumpets. And then there's yet another argument, which I hope I'm not confusing you with. After the 5th seal, remember, it's the martyrs in heaven, and they say, how long, Lord, until you will avenge our blood on the earth? And it seems that this statement in chapter 6 is related to another statement in chapter 10, right after the, this is right before the 7th trumpet. Take a look at this potential relationship that John is establishing between the martyr's cry of how long, and they're told to rest a little longer. And it seems like this little longer is connected to the delay described in chapter 10, where it says that the angel says there will be no more delay, for in the days of the trumpet call, which is going to be sounded by the 7th angel, then the mystery of God will be fulfilled. So do you want to know how long, O saints in heaven, until God's mystery is fulfilled? Well, you have to wait until after the 7th trumpet. Therefore, trumpets must come after the seals. I could do this all day. And then again, notice how let's consider the 144,000 who are sealed, and also the mark of the beast. So we have the mark of the believer in chapter 7, and we have the mark of the beast in chapter 13. So these 144,000 are sealed directly in response to a question asked in the 6th seal. Take a look at this. So in the 6th seal, the dwellers on the earth ask, who can stand against the great day of the wrath of God? And the answer is those who are sealed. The very next verse tells you who can stand. Well, it is those who are sealed of God. And then if we move from this to the trumpets, only those who do not have the seal of God are targeted by the 5th trumpet. So it seems like we have 6th seal, and then there's a question, and then there's the sealing, and then there's the 5th trumpet. So therefore, the trumpets must come after the seals. And then also, this statement about the sealing of 144,000, it opens by saying, do not harm the earth, do not harm the sea, do not harm the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God. So they seal the 144,000, and then the first 2 trumpets target those same locales, earth, trees, and seas. Again, arguing that the sealing comes after, the sealing 144,000 comes after seal number 6, which comes before trumpets 1 and 2. And then if we consider the mark of the beast, which happens in chapter 13, you'll notice that the first bowl targets only those who have the mark of the beast, which is yet another argument for a chronological reading, a chronological and linear reading of the book of Revelation. And so that is how we are going to read the book of Revelation, where the seal judgments are at the beginning of the 7-year tribulation, just as Jesus outlined. And after those, or in the midst of the seal judgments, there is great persecution which falls on the believers who are present during this time. And then the trumpet judgments are going to be there in the first 3.5 years as well, because The first woe takes place after the fifth trumpet, and then the second woe takes place at the midway point after the two witnesses are killed. And then we have the bowl judgments there at the end of the 3.5 years before the second coming of Jesus. So where does this leave us? I mean, after the three cycles of God's judgment, the wrath of God is finished, but the earth has been devastated. It has been ruined. Wherever you look, fires are blazing over the earth. The fish in the sea are dead. Over half of the population on the earth has died as well. And if we reflect back on the Old Testament, after the seventh plague on Egypt, Pharaoh's own servants are begging Pharaoh, saying, "Do you not yet understand that Egypt is ruined, just like the earth is ruined during this time?" It's no surprise then that God is going to model his final judgment against the hard-hearted world after his great acts of judgment and deliverance in the Exodus. Look at these parallels between the judgments in Revelation, specifically bowls and trumpets, and the Egyptian plagues. We have water into blood. We have boils on the skin. We have hail and lightning, darkness, and locusts as well. And there's special locusts in Revelation 19. Well, what is going to happen to believers during this time? Now, John knew after all of this intensity, he knew that his reader would be asking that question, and therefore he included these interludes, these pauses, these breaks in the judgment in order to address that question about what will happen to the believers during this time. And we're going to take a look at these interludes in Revelation 7, 10 to 11, and 12 to 14 in our next lecture.